Well, I'm conscious we are a very small group, so I don't know if it will make sense for us to do breakout rooms. I forgot to ask you, Chirag. Sometimes speakers need to dash off, and you just mentioned that you had a really busy day. So if you need to excuse yourself after a little bit for Q&A, I totally understand. If you like to stick, around and maybe join the conversation about your talk, you're most welcome as well. So what I'll do, I'll invite maybe people to share in the chat box if they haven't yet questions, and while we wait for some questions from the group, I'm gonna ask some additional questions, if that's okay, Chirag. So self-care, that's a classical question we ask. Thanks, Phil, you already told us before, no worries. Self-care, you already mentioned martial arts and the Wim Hof method, which I was very impressed. So I think you already addressed that one. In terms of challenges, is there any particular challenge that you faced recently in your role, in your career, Chirag, that you like to share? So that's number one. And number two, you already touched on that slightly as well. So for the cybersecurity professionals that might watch the recording later, what would be your advice? You gave many tips, but what would be your advice around that self-management? You mentioned that many professionals are under medication, which is really sad, a statistic. So in terms of tip or advice, what would you have to say that? So personal challenge and advice to cybersecurity professionals.
Yeah, look, in terms of advice, I think it's really important to remember that you are not in this alone. And I think you need to have, so I know there are organizations where there is just one person looking out of cybersecurity, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean you need to be alone. And I think you need to reach out to, associations, to networks, and even within your organization, make those allies. Because, far too often you're stuck in a corner doing your thing and getting frustrated. But if you only just were able to communicate that better, it could have helped. I'm not saying that's your magic bullet, but that'll help. I think the other thing to me is, just challenging ourselves and asking, which is why I talked about it, is because I've had to challenge myself from time to time, is, am I talking in a language the other person's understanding? And I think that to us is an important aspect to it, is, just to reflect on that with a self-care bit. But yeah, look, have a life. And I really think, no jobs, getting so stressed out over that you can't live your life and it's affecting you personally. Look, there's stressors in every job. And that just comes with territory. But if you're feeling that, it's time to probably just pause and ask, is this the right role for me?
Thanks. I actually just spotted Phil. Sorry, I thought that you were just saying that you're leaving early. Let's go with Phil's question, because he's leaving soon. So number one, what's your style, Chirag? Mine is Juryu Karate. And if we get
Go Juru.
Oh, nice.
And designing cybersecurity into business strategy. Maybe you can comment on that, Phil. Over to you before you run.
Yes, that's the important one, is how do you go about, we especially our organization, we're quite strong on cybersecurity. We have a really good team that takes all those positive actions you've spoken about. They're pretty much at the forefront of that. They do a lot of those things already. So how do you go about designing cybersecurity into a business strategy?
Yeah.
So that becomes like front and center when you're looking at what are the things you need to do to differentiate yourself.
Yeah, look, I think to me, it starts with making that tangible connection to the business strategy. So as an example, say if you have an organization that is trying to go direct to consumer via digital channels. So that's a business goal, because they just have decided they want to expand in this way and they want to drive that. So I think to me, when I think about a cyber strategy to support that, it comes with, presenting that picture to leadership, that what good looks like to you if you want to expand into that area is, more customers interacting with us via our digital channels. So be it our app, or be it chatbots, or be it the website. I think driving that idea of what that looks like, but then also driving the threat landscape, which is relevant, is if our customers can reach us from anywhere, so can the bad actors. I think putting that overlay on top of it, and then marrying it up to the controls that we can actually have require a cyber strategy to meet that business objective. Because in that case, your controls now will start to focus more on, securing your web-facing assets, both from a technical perspective, training your developers to do that. And I think articulating those technical controls, people controls, process controls, with that business objective in the cyber strategy, I think that resonates better, because now you're tying it to a clear outcome as opposed to just talking about application security in isolation, because that doesn't necessarily resonate well.
Now, it's an interesting one, because as we build out more and more services, digital services, particularly like most of our, I won't speak to anybody else, but most of our strategy is now rent rather than build. So you're increasing the attack surface every time you engage with a new SaaS product and you bring it in, and you've got to connect to your own data via building new APIs and connectivity. You're constantly increasing the threat landscape. I think those two are really, I don't think we do it well yet in terms of connecting the two there. So I think that's a focus.
It's good.
All right, thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Phil.
Perhaps somewhat related to that, if I could just jump in for a sec, somewhat related to that, Phil, I had a question that came up that probably applies a little bit, and that's, do organizations have a duty to the customers, clients, and consumers when it comes to information security, or is the duty to shareholders and legislation? Now,
No,
if it's that,
it's to the customer. Like, that's one shift we've had.
Yeah.
But we don't have shareholders, so we don't have to worry about that. But it's a significant shift, like data. We had a session on this today, actually, around the customer's data privacy is front and center now. So I think it's more about the individual than the shareholder, at least in our organization.
Because we had that sort of discussion at work as part of, we're doing a ground up rewrite at the moment of all of our code base. We had a discussion about that as part of it, and that led us very much to the path of don't trust third parties, keep the data ourselves.
That's where we are, right?
So we moved away from the whole software as a service. Like, don't get other people's software as a service. If we can do it internally, do it internally. And it created quite a different shift in how we operate. And we're talking a dev team of 4 people to do that. So
I'll excuse myself because I'll jump in. I'm conscious of time. I don't know if Chirag needs to dash off soon. So just Lisa, your question. So would you like to unmute yourself and ask directly to Chirag?
Yeah, Lisa? So you talked about sort of being more the positive stories rather than the negative ones. And we tend to hear about the negative ones, like in the press and that breaches. So my question was, where do we go to hear about the positive stories?
Yeah. Look, I think that's the big ticket item, right, Lisa, is to me, I think the positive stories come when you enable, our organizations to do what they do best. And I feel, which is where I brought up the example of, how did you enable a digital strategy or a direct to consumer strategy, or how you help people to reach services they wouldn't have been able to reach through cybersecurity. And I think that is a story which I like talking about more. But I mean, when you think about the positives also, is it often gets lost, but the reporting that we get from our people when they see something suspicious in organizations, that's something we celebrated about. I think that doesn't get talked about much. It's good things that people do. We talk about the breaches, but we don't talk about people who actually try to do the right thing every day, of people who engage with, with the security team to do a vendor assessment before they onboard a vendor or go to a SaaS solution. I think those are so a positive story doesn't have to be this great, news article. It are these micro wins that we need to bring to bear more and more. And I find even cyber professionals sometimes, just because takes a certain type of person to be a cyber professional, I reckon. But I mean, the mindset is usually towards preventing things, but not pausing and celebrating. I think to me, I've tried to shed light on, those outcomes. And also even small things like when just reflecting on the fact that when people trust you with your data, and you are now able to, hand on heart say that you matured a security posture and you demonstrate that on a maturity curve. I mean, those are real human lives that you actually have helped in a positive way. You save somebody from, the trauma and the headache of having to change their identity documents or having to worry about the loan that they'll apply. I think putting those human stories has really helped. I don't think we talk about the human stories that come with the people we talk about. I think it's all threats and risks and control which have their place, but the human aspect is where I go to find the wins. And they typically come from talking to the business, because I only can figure that out if I understand, okay, that my business is about, somebody applying for for a mortgage and getting that closed in record time, because now they can go and buy a home, and that just helps kind of articulate that. But if I never had that conversation, for me it'd be just a matter of, am I seeing a tax come in and am I able to stop them and respond to them?
Yeah, that makes sense. Great, thank you.
I think for me, one of the easiest good news stories, and I see it almost every day, is I look at my junk mail folder and go, how many phishing emails did I not receive? And there's probably work-related 20 a day.
Yeah.
And that's 20 good news stories that we've just had because I didn't bother reading them.
If I could only have like a junk folder for those text messages that go to my phone and say that, there's some delivery that needs a small payment, to be released.
I saw an ad on LinkedIn the other day by Telstra, and it was how many emails their servers have filtered out.
Wow.
That were phishing emails. And it was like however many million emails in the last week that they haven't delivered to customers. And that was an ad. So they're celebrating it.
Yeah. Okay.
They're hopefully applying that to SMS as well. So maybe they'll be celebrating that one soon.
Oh gosh, I hope so. That would be really nice.
And you started to see like even Apple in some of their ads now talking about privacy as being the key differentiator that they have over competition. I mean, that was quite amazing to me that they're celebrating the fact that they value users' privacy and taking a not so gentle shot at some of their competitors.
Okay, I'm sure we could now keep going. I'm cautious of time though, and Chirag, you've been very generous. So as I said before, you're most welcome if you need to excuse yourself. I don't know what your levels of energy are at the moment.
I'll go for it, Nat. I'll just finish it. Let's do it.
Yeah. Oh, you stay with us? Yeah. Okay, wonderful. Lovely. Thanks so much. So I'll just go through quickly a couple of slides before we move into, we're not going to move into breakout room. We will just use this except from your book for the discussion and the questions you shared, Chirag. So just a heads up on our next speakers. So I'm excited to share we have already secured speakers for the next 4 roundtables. So we have Rob James, former CTO for Qantas and CIO at Vodafone next month. Ram, which is a really good friend of mine, a big Lisa mine.
Yes,
Ram.
I know him very well.
Yeah, former Accenture with the Bureau of Meteorology. So he's up in May.
He's got long hair now, Nat.
Yeah, I know.
What's going on?
Yeah, I met him for lunch the other day. Yeah, he lost weight. He's cycling like crazy. Yeah, pretty different. Yes. And Rahul Kasiris, who is CIO 50, working, long term, working for not-for-profits. A really beautiful journey as a CIO. And Sammy from Bupa, which I actually share with you. If you already left, I was very excited when I met Sammy the other day, and he agreed to be a champion and also to be a speaker later in the year. So those are the next speakers we have lined up. And we're not having breakout room because it does not make sense. We're such a small group. So here it's a little bit of inspiration, like a conversation starter. So in addition to everything that we heard from Chirag, and it's amazing how much he managed to cover, in the small slot. I definitely would listen to, again, there are so many nuggets in there. So here's some ideas on things that we could use to continue the conversation. So question number 1, what are the key challenges in engaging with your business executives? I think that was a question more for cybersecurity experts or professionals. Maybe we can skip that one for now. But the second one is, how can cybersecurity teams better engage with you to get your support? So, a couple of people here who is actually working the other side of the fence. What do you think that cybersecurity will need to do to engage with you better? And hopefully when cybersecurity professionals listen to this in our YouTube channel, that will make sense to them as well. And the third question, how would you define a good culture for technology and cybersecurity? So those are the 3 questions, and you might have read with the PDF that I shared on LinkedIn, the section from Chirag's book that talks about emotional intelligence and self-awareness. So I would suggest let's start with looking at those questions. Does anyone have any comments or reflections to make in relation to any of those? Sahil. Go for it.
Yeah, I think on the question number one is where you face, like as a CIO, even I have been handling cybersecurity in a different capacity. It's a big challenge actually when you go to your exco committee or your IT steering committee or cybersecurity committees. It's become very difficult when somebody is presenting in very technical terms. You can look at the faces; they are all black. There was the other day I was doing some presentations, and one of my cyber guy who was presenting, you know, they are all business guys. I mean, if you see the business executive, they all understand numbers. And Chirag also mentioned about you have to be in their shoes when you have to be a very good storyteller when you're presenting something. And if you want them to engage and get a buy-in from them, you have to make a story like how it is engaging. Like, for example, ransomware protection. This is quite known these days. Right now, it is the most attack happening. There are different way it captures, and the way it has to be. If you want to buy in, you want to implement something in terms of protection from this ransomware attack, or you are seeking some investment to do that, and then you have to make in their language until unless they understood the value coming out of it, and they will not get they will not be onboarded with you. So the most important part when you're engaging with business executive, of course, you have to have their language, very simplistic way to make it understand. Of course, sometimes there was a days earlier, cybersecurity was a kind of IT, like a cost center, but nowadays everybody aware of that. Like you have to invest, and cybersecurity is really a risk area where you have to assess your threats. So people understand, but technically explaining will not help you. You have to get into the issue. So that's what I wanted to comment on the question one, though you have tried to dodge it, but I thought
Excellent.
take it.
Thanks so much, Sahil. And before I think Chirag might want to comment, just want to say two things real quick. Number one, Chirag has one whole episode on his podcast about storytelling. So to your point, Chirag, advertise your podcast again. And number two, Guy, welcome. I can see you on your iPhone. I don't know what happened, but good to see that you made it, although towards the end. I hope we can hear us okay. So feel free to unmute yourself and join the conversation, Guy. Welcome back. Sorry, who was about to talk?
Sorry, Natalie, I'm driving at the moment. So I'm just listening.
No worries. Okay, you're welcome. Okay, good to have you here anyway.
Cheers.
I was just going to comment a bit on what Sahil had said there. And I think for me, it's really important. I've dealt with some executives before where they've been like, I've worked in IT companies. So we've worked at a SMS provider. We don't need to worry about security, about phishing attacks. Our users are smart. They work for an IT company. And so we humanized it. And I went around the organization and found sort of the least technical person we could and got them to say, like, we started sending them emails and they knew it was coming, and they were like, some will be phishing emails and some will be legit. You won't know, you have to work out which is which. And we then got them to present that data back to the exec to say, I got caught by 20 phishing emails out of 80. I thought that I was avoiding 10 phishing emails that were legit out of that 80 as well. And so we humanized it, and they suddenly said, hang on a minute, our staff aren't as smart as we thought they were in the sense of information security. Now, very different when you're also then dealing with developers. You have 30% of that company was a development team, and the last thing they want is an email filter put on their email account because they take offense to that. So it's a real balancing act there, but it was humanizing it to get the message across was the key thing for us there.
Okay, I'd love to hear from people that I haven't heard a voice today. That means you, Alex Andronacci. I'm sure you have lots to say. I'm sure you have lots.
It's unusual for Alex
Yeah,
not to have a lot to say.
Come on. Tell us what's in your mind.
No, not at all. Can you hear me, Natalie?
Yeah, loud and clear, okay. Alex. Yes.
Beautiful. No, I mean, look, the third question is the one that I'm more interested because actually this weekend I was talking to Tessa. I don't know if you remember Lisa, Tessa. And Tessa, Tessa is about to launch a business on cybersecurity, but her focus is going to be on culture, is on change, on training. And we had a long conversation of how do we not talk about cybersecurity just to avoid exactly what you, Sahil, were saying, to make it so complicated that people switch off. Because in my last job at EY, I work at Fonterra, and if they wanted to get an IT project approved, they just had to mark it as cyber sensitive, and everything gets approved, right? So cyber, I think, has gotten this now ban, which basically is if you mark anything cyber, will get approved. But people are questioning now, right? Is it really that important, right? So we are, I think, skating on very thin ice, where some people abuse cyber to get money. Some people switch off because it's too complicated. And I like what Chirag said in terms of how do we make this part of the culture? How do we make it part of the business strategy? How do we just embed it in there? Like we embed KPIs, huh? We report on sales, but we don't report on good stories, which I like, Lisa, what you were talking about, right? So to me, to be honest, I'm trying to think, how would things look like tomorrow if we were to reshape this, right? It's Chirag and I and Lisa and we'll go to a new company tomorrow. Would we have a cyber team? Now, would we brand it as cyber? Maybe no, right? How do we embed that? You know, so how do we actually, and how do we make the users more responsible and accountable? I work at Toll Holdings, and they had 2 cyber attacks while I was there, right? So IT blames the users blame IT, and it ended up there. But nothing has changed in those organizations, even those 2 attacks, which is my second worry. Right? We've seen a lot of attacks, but to be honest, at all, nothing has changed. They haven't made it part of the business change. They haven't made it part of the transformation. They just basically dealt with the problem and moved on. So I guess those are the 2 aspects. I like number 3. But you, Chirag, I mean, if you were in a new place day after tomorrow, what would you do differently? Or what would you start differently?
Oh, putting Chirag on the spot. See, you didn't expect that, Chirag, did you? Being bombarded. But I think it's a good conversation, yes. And you see, I want authentic, robust conversations at the start.
No, it's good. I think it's and it's a good question. I mean, in terms of the culture bit, right? I think culture is such an important aspect of it. Far too often, though, culture to organizations has meant just training people. And it has meant, you know, getting them to be aware of phishing and all these other things. But I think there's a lot more to it. I think the thing which I look for is the organizational culture, and cybersecurity culture is part of that culture. If it's an organizational culture that is authentic, you know, that is rewarding people for the right behaviors, that is contingent on doing the right thing by their customers, even if it means slowing down a product launch or taking, you know, certain hits. I think in those organizations, I think the culture of cybersecurity is naturally going to go in much better. I think the problem happens when a culture conflict between a cyber team that is trying to, you know, do all of these things and encourage people to report things, while, you know, the organizational culture kind of looks down upon that. Is all about keeping things, everything's fine, even if it's not. I think that authenticity is a big part of it. But also, I think it comes down to, you know, to me about, I keep talking about the business a lot, and I do that because, you know, having those conversations with business stakeholders allows us to talk in a language that they actually understand. Because far too often, you know, do we know what brings in the revenue? Like beyond the superficial level, do we actually know what systems bring in the revenue, how we go, the challenges that our frontline people face? Because then you can talk and articulate differently about cybersecurity. So I think those cultural things matter to me. It's if those are in place, and if you're doing that, I think you typically have a better chance of succeeding, because now you're naturally going to talk a language, and you'll pick up words which your business uses when you engage with them. I think when we have put, sometimes, you know, naturally cyber teams report into CIO teams or technology teams. That in some organizations may not work too well. I think sometimes you need to be away from those teams and actually report into the business, because then you can actually have those authentic conversations, because there are good CIOs and there are people at CIOs who are responsible and do it well. But then there are also that sometimes there's a conflict in certain areas where for a CIO and availability is a key metric, and this is what they're judged on, is are the systems available. But for security, that may not necessarily be the only metric that they are judged on. I think what are you judged on and what rewards success, what it look like to you? I think having that understanding, that shared understanding, allows you to actually have a good culture that you can form.
Thanks, Chirag. And I agree. I highly agree on the rewards part, and highly agree on potentially, I mean, we talk about cost of goods sold, right? Or cost of services. What about if that cost, right, was not going to come if there was a security breach or a security risk? I mean, those numbers are not really yet today attached together, right? It's an IT problem.
And that's the thing, is because we haven't engaged, right, as effectively. And I keep talking engagement. Well, I think sometimes also a matter of that, truly understanding the impact when something would go wrong requires you to understand the financials associated with it, the reputational aspect, the legal aspect. I think, and you can't figure out all of those just working with technology peers. But if you still see today, even progressive CISOs are spending a lot of their time just talking to technology teams and CIOs and technology directors. I think we need to change that.
Thank
you. Okay.
one more thing.
Yeah, one last. No, go for it. So go. Sorry, Sahil, please.
I just wanted to add one more thing here. My experience with the different banks in this part of world, Africa, sometimes in addition to whatever we are saying about the business and the roles about security, some of the organization where I see where also Alex has touched upon that there was 2 attacks happened and they just try to fix the problem. One of the major problem what I see is it's become like a checkbox kind of a culture. When you start questioning, like when business start questioning or compliance or risk start questioning about your preparedness, like you got an approval on investment, and when you try to question the security or cyber team about the preparedness or how it is, then it becomes more in terms of checklist, like yes, we have this can happen, until unless you're breached. So it is both ways actually. In my view, of course, you have to explain the business executive or CFOs in terms of investment or kind of a cybersecurity landscape, but don't even cyber side. Don't I just got attracted by the comment Alex made. You fixed the problem and you moved on. There is nothing much you did onto the cultural for the future's perspective. That is very common actually, and that's it's risky. Because you have not fixed the problem in holistic view. You just fix that particular problem at that point of time, and that's where the cultural change, what Chirag also attached to it, like it has to be the part of the organizational cultural. So you do the right thing. You avoid the guys who are supporting in that journey. So that's important. I just wanted to highlight that point because that's very common actually in practice.
One of my key takeaways from what Alex said then was that it became very adversarial. It was an IT problem or it was a user problem, and whose fault was it? And I've always found, at least in my experience, that as an IT person, I should always say it's an IT problem. It is my fault. I didn't protect the user from it. And that then gets a lot of power. And this comes back a little bit to the first question of how do we communicate with business executives? It's an IT problem. I could not protect them against it. I need to ask them to take these actions because it's not possible for me to do that yet. I'm still working out a way to do it. And then the business executives are like, so it's a deficiency in IT, have some more money to go and investigate that. And meanwhile, we'll get training to the users and we'll say to the users, can you please help the IT team or the security team to do this? Because they're trying to work out how to do it for you. And that's really powerful, admitting that we don't have the capability to do this yet. It works for the executives and for the end users.
I wonder if that would depend on the organizational structure as well, what security is reporting to. Anyhow, it looks like we could definitely continue this conversation for a little longer, but I'm conscious of time. And as you know, I really like to close with each of you sharing what has been your key main takeaway. So I'll skip these. We've done our kind of debrief already. We had a discussion just here. Yeah, I'd love to hear, before we share the feedback survey, what has been the key learning? So the one thing, perhaps one thing that you're doing differently, maybe one next step as a result of this conversation, because you invested, precious 90 minutes of your life being here, which we really appreciate. And I'd love to hear, from you what actually, what is your volunteer, and then we go around. So who would like to volunteer and share first? What are you going to do differently, or one?
Let's start with Alex then, given that is A.
Go.
No, I mean, look, I would say that organizational change aspect and culture. I mean, so which is non-IT, which I love from this session.
Okay. Thanks, Alex. And on my screen, I would have, if I go clockwise, I'll have Michael.
Now I've got to really quickly find my unmute button. I like the comment that we're the CISO of our own homes, and we need to be aware of like what that means for us as effectively a small company. It's not necessarily a profitable one, but anyway. For me, the key takeaway there was it really made me think we need to be aware of what data we're sharing. And as I thought that, I'm like, I'm taking a drink from a bottle that logs my water consumption to the cloud. Do I really need to do that? Probably not, but at the same time, I've given up on the idea of privacy. But if my daughter was doing that, I'd be going, are you aware that that means that data is available to everyone else? Whether or not you think it is, doesn't matter, it is. So yeah, that's my little bit of food for thought, or drink for thought, as the case may be.
Thanks, Michael. Lisa.
Yeah, so my takeaway is to focus on those positive stories and the storytelling. Yeah, and being able to tell the stories in that business terminology when you're talking to a business audience. That's my takeaway.
Super. So searching and keeping an eye on those, created maybe a bank of positive stories around cybersecurity. Thank you. Sahil.
I think in addition to what everybody has said, I would take away today, in addition to whatever, it's a human factor, the central design. When you're designing, like as a CIO, when we design any product or something, keeping human as a centric view, as in the Chirag mentioned very categorically, he mentioned about the human factor, people issue. One of the most vulnerable thing is people, whether it is external, we look at it, but it is internal who need to be also made aware about all these changes happening on the cyberspace. So, and when you design anything, any product, or whether it is digital product or internal product, you have to keep that in mind. So that would be my takeaway today. In addition to, of course, the storytelling and the positive vibes. Positive vibes was a good idea, actually. We always scare people, whenever we have like enterprise risk committees, you talk about how many breaches you had. You never talk about how many breaches you have saved. Like, for example, one customer we had, like in this part of world, in Africa, SIM swap is a kind of a very big issue. And what tools or how you aware a customer to avoid SIM swapping, we do on daily basis. Actually, we get a lot of calls on our contact centers, like people are receiving ODPs, and other people are trying to access their mobile channels. So this has to be also been highlighted when we are presenting. So I'll take that one, and that I'll try to implement in my bank as well.
Thank you. Good stories, good stuff. Thanks, Sahil. I'm not sure if Guy will be able to multitask and unmute himself and share. Are you? Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear you. I think the storytelling of the positive aspect's a good one, because I've walked into a company recently that has 70 years of, it's never happened to us before, so it's never going to happen. So, and then so they're very hardened to the scare tactics. It doesn't work. So I think the storytelling, but a positive story, is a good slant on it that might help. So yeah, I agree with that one.
Good stuff. Thanks, Guy. So I can see the theme of, the positive, and of course, with my background in positive psychology, I really like that story of, the storytelling, the positive stories bank. For me, I think, Chirag, it's really how you started the conversation. Your focus on what I call the cognitive reframing of positioning cybersecurity at the heart of building trust so we can enjoy technology. So that's such a beautiful way to position cybersecurity, isn't it? Because you are talking about a higher purpose. What's the higher purpose of cybersecurity? To allow us to enjoy, technology with trust. So that's I guess the key takeaway from me. But I'll definitely watch your talk again and again and again. Good stuff. So just about to close. So on the dot, I think it will be. So 2 minutes to go. Real quick, as usual. I think Michael was about to share. If not, I'll send the pack anyway. So this is a little article if you want to read as a warm-up activity for next month roundtable with Rob James from Vodafone. He had one of his side projects was this startup called Firestory that they develop software to help to prevent bushfires. So quite interesting. So that's something that he was involved. So that's the article if you want to read and learn a little bit more about Rob in preparation for the next roundtable. The feedback survey. So if you can take a couple of minutes, we really appreciate. So tell us what you think we did well and what we could have done better today. And that's it on the dot. So thanks so much. Please do spread the word. Let us know what you think we did well and we could do better. Thanks for your time. Thanks for showing up. And look forward to seeing you in future roundtables.
Thank you. Great to meet you all.
Thanks, Chirag.
Thank you all.